Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Everlasting Veteran. I am joined in studio with Amanda Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, U.S. Army,
Correct.
Chaplain.
Correct.
And I am your host, Ryan Landry, the Everlasting Veteran Podcast. Welcome to the studio. I'm so glad to have you on today. And we're going to go through your journey of becoming a chaplain.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. Glad to have this opportunity to just spend time with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of rewind. Like before you became a chaplain, what was your military career like? And we'll start going into that transition.
Yeah, so I was actually contemplating it today because I was talking to somebody at church, and this is my 21st year. So I've done a little bit of active duty time, reserves, and then the longest in the Texas Army National Guard. And so at 15 years I was a staff sergeant in a religious affairs NCO, and at that time was when God really started putting it on my heart that I was supposed to be a chaplain, which for me growing up in the church I grew up, I never had seen any women pray nor like do any kind of participation in person. And so it was like kind of the theory, which no one says to you, you have to be quiet, but essentially that's the way that I grew up, was that you're supposed to be quiet in the church. There's not a lot of voice for a woman in the church. So when God started calling me into ministry, I really didn't know exactly what did that look like. Like what do you want me to do, God? And so he was waking me up. And I think that this happens to a lot of people when he wants you to move in a certain capacity. He'll wake you up at 3 a.m. That's a favorite time for God to wake you up. And so, and it doesn't have to be like because you need to go into ministry. It can be that you need like a life change or something is off, or he's like, hey, I need you to move in this capacity, because he continues to do this to me. And he's done it throughout my life. I wasn't so recognizing that this is what's occurring. And so he started waking me up about 3 o'clock for about 3 months. And he had placed it in my heart that I was supposed to serve as a chaplain. But at this point, I'm preparing for a bodybuilding show. And I was not really in the mode of like, oh, I want to go back to school. I just finished my MBA. So I'm thinking, oh, well. And so I'm trying to negotiate with God, right? I'm like, well, could I do the show? And then maybe I'll try out a class of seminary and see how that goes. And he's like, no. And so things kind of just lined up in a way that was for him. And one of the things that was funny was I couldn't sleep one night, and I'm on Google, and pops this article on the shortage of military chaplains. And I'm reading this article, and it's midnight, and I'm like, God, you're too funny, because it's an old article. It's not a new article. It's like 3 years old when I'm reading it. And I had read it before, but it didn't hit me the way that it hit me that night. So I started looking for seminaries and kind of wrapping my head around the fact that I need to go back to school again. I've been going to school I had got my bachelor's in business management. I had got my MBA, and I was on pretty good, with this being a guard life, a pretty good civilian track for management in Geico. Like I'd been working for Geico for 10 or 11 years at this point and managing people for most of the time. And I had this track that I was going to, I wanted to be a director at some point. And he was basically like, no, that's not where we're going. So I pressed a couple buttons to enroll in seminary. Just the information button, bing. And I'm like, and then they start calling you, as schools do. And they're like, hey, you want to know about it? And the first one that called me just wasn't a good fit for me, which I was fine with, because I'm like, see, I knew it wasn't going to be a fit. And in the midst of these schools calling me that week, I'm also invited to go to the Texas border, because in Texas, we're back and forth on going to the border, not going to the border, going to the border. So I get told I need to go to the border for a month. And so I'm like packed, but it kept changing. Like, you're going to the border, you're not, the whole week. And then I go into the drill weekend. And this is like round 6 of going to the border. And I get there. And by this point, I had had a conversation with the trainer that I was training for the show, and told him, hey, I might go to the border. And so he dropped me as a client because he wanted to fill that space. So no longer doing bodybuilding at that moment. Like, I don't have a trainer. And then I get to drill, and they said, oh, you're not going to the border. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's interesting. And then I finally answer the phone to Liberty, which is where I ended up getting my master's of divinity. And they tell me about the program. I'm like, okay, this is more affordable, a little bit more flexible for what I need to do. Like they're not needing I did everything online. So I didn't have to go there in person, which was important because it's like I'm balancing at this point, like kids, now a seminary degree, full-time work, and a drill weekend. So I'm like, how is this going to work? So anyway, I say yes, like I want to do it, but I'm going to wait 4 or 5 months in my head. This is the plan. And then by the end of that weekend, though, like, so this is Friday. On Friday night, I'm like, I think I should just do it. So then Saturday, I go down and get the packet from the specialty branch recruiting team. And the guy tries to convince me out of it because he's like, you're at 15 years, you're a staff sergeant, you're about to get E7. Like, what's wrong with you? Why would you want to start over with a gold bar? That's so stupid. And I was like, I don't know. God's telling me to do this thing. So got the yes, I got the packet, and immediately like everything started just really flowing together. So usually it takes about a year. Like right now I'm a chaplain recruiter. So I can tell you that it takes about a year to make a chaplain or a chaplain candidate packet. But I enrolled and into school and I got my packet done. And 5 months later, I'm pinning on a gold bar and I'm a chaplain candidate. So then throughout this adventure, God has just continued to fast forward because I think the biggest thing that we need to do as humans is just to say yes, right? Like he will put something on your heart. And a lot of times we'll do what Jonah would do, which is try to escape what he's called us to do. We're like, but I could just go over here and do it this way. Like we always have a better plan.
Right.
Well, if we make the plan be his plan, it works out a lot easier. And so that's what I've determined because as soon as I said yes, then we are thrown into the adventures of COVID. So I go from as soon as I pinned on the gold bar, I was able to get to chaplain school right away. So chaplain candidate, going to chaplain school, get that done, and then they're like, "Hey, we'd like you to recruit for a little bit." So I'm recruiting chaplains for a minute as a brand new chaplain candidate, which was a super great opportunity. So I'm like, "Okay, cool," and then we lose the funds. So okay, no more recruiting. I go back to Geico full time again. And then COVID happens. And so I'm at a unit that is it's emergency response type of unit. We work with FEMA. We do all the natural disasters and anything where it's like the immediate response. So my unit gets called up. They're doing in processing for the COVID mission. The borders popped up, a hurricane's coming, and civil unrest is happening. So like we spend about a month in processing people for nobody knows what's going to happen, right? Like you're like, they get there and they're like, well, what are we coming here for? I'm like, well, it could be COVID mission. It could be the border. It could be, and so anyway, I did that for a little while and then bounced back to Geico again and then get called on the COVID mission. And they said, oh, could you just come for about a month? Normally as a chaplain candidate, you don't get put on orders because you're supposed to be in like a training status. And so during your chaplain candidate time, you're supposed to be focused on just getting school done. But because I'd already been in that unit and they had trust in me that I could make magic happen, right? The chief of staff was like, hey, I'd like you to go there and work on this COVID mission. I'm like, well, so I'm like, well, I think you should find like a full-fledged chaplain for this because I'm not supposed to be on this mission. But I was like, if you can't find one, let me know. So then fast forward into we had what we called snow vid. So it was snow and COVID at the same time. So all of us got activated for a snow mission. And I'm the OIC for snow vision. And he once again asks me, and I'm like, okay, just hold on. And I get a call from the state chaplain that's sitting on the COVID mission. And he says, hey, could you find me a chaplain assistant or a religious affairs NCO that could work with me? And I said, oh, well, where would they be working with you? And they're like, oh, at the like Texas military headquarters. And I'm like, well, so he's like, there's like 2 stars and I need somebody who's really good with Excel. And he's like, so could I have yours? And I was like, well, the one that we have isn't going to work out for you. And I was trying to explain nicely that it's not going to work. I said, I'll call all of them, all the ones that were like E5 and above, and find him one. So I call 10 different people. No one is available or willing to go. So I'm like, call him back and I say, sir, have an idea for you. I was like, I've called all these people and I had worked with him before. So I said, how about I come and be a hybrid of a chaplain candidate and a chaplain assistant at the same time. So I did that and I was just supposed to be there a month. And then I ended up there for 2 years.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, because COVID didn't end, right?
Yeah.
So some of our people popped off to go to the border from COVID. And then in the midst of it, like, so during the time that I'm getting my master's of divinity, I'm on this full-time COVID adventure, like traveling across Texas, visiting the testing teams, visiting the shot teams, like just visiting everybody. We had a team that did all the COVID tracking. So anybody who had COVID that was our soldiers tracking. Anyway, so doing all of these things. And so I get the master's of master's of divinity done. I can't say that word for some reason. And when I get it done, I'm like, for some reason, I'm like, I need to get this one August deadline so that I can make this one board. It was like the last board of the year. Well, as soon as I make the board and I made it like right on time, everything works out good. The day I pin on the cross, they're like, could you deploy? And I'm like, ah, okay. I'm like, well, let me think about it once again. Like, let me think about it. Well, I'm officiating a wedding and the state chaplain pops back up and's like, hi, you should probably plan that you're going to deploy. And I said, okay, let me think about it again because I've only been a chaplain at this point, like 3 days. And so I'm in the middle of a bunch of nonprofit things. I was with Wings for Warriors out of Arizona, and they were having a gala. So I'm flying out there, and God had put on my heart again, like, you should be prepared for this deployment because you're going on it. And so from Friday, when I started the journey of flying to Arizona, to Sunday, I called and I said, I let the full-time support chaplain know, go ahead and put me on the roster. Like, I'll take the deployment. So God has kept me for sure very busy between COVID deployment and then coming back. And now a year after deployment, I became the full-time chaplain recruiter for Texas. And so that's what I'm currently doing, which is like something I've prayed for since I got that little taste, right? I had I think it was like a 4 or 5 minute taste of recruiting. But in that time, I'm very much into networking, marketing, just growing the community. And so I could see that it would be a great opportunity for me. And we were at 43% strength before I got there. So finally, really long story short, I started the job last April and we are growing exponentially now. So definitely on our path to being the great state of Texas full of chaplains. So that's the long
Right.
and short of my really adventurous chaplain life.
Yeah. I mean, everything you're talking about, I mean, obviously there's so much detail, like,
Yeah,
you could go on probably for hours of,
I could.
stories and everything like that. But, everything you're saying, like, it stays true to like when you get out of service, like
Mm-hmm,
whatever your faith is, right? And you root yourself in your faith, how your faith is, with your God, right?
mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
there are so many things that you're saying that you could have just been like, it's not time, right? But you
Mm-hmm,
stuck with it, right? And
mm-hmm,
things lined up the way they should, and, you just you kept saying it over and over, you knew it in your heart, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you stayed true to who you are, you stayed true to your faith, and you stayed true to what your mission is in your relationship with God,
Mm-hmm.
and that saw you through so many, you probably didn't talk about the trials and tribulations of
Oh no.
second guessing, the
Yeah.
answers that you were giving,
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't know what was on the other side, right?
Yeah. Well, we
And
still don't know, like, even when you walked through it, because it like I hadn't had a lot of time after deployment. I worked for 3 years straight, right, without really a day off, because COVID, you're on call. Deployment, you're on call. And so when I got home and I came back to Geico for the 8 months, was sitting here at this desk that I'm sitting in here now, and it took some time because I felt like I had went to jail, because I went from working 3 years to I'm now working from home, and it feels really weird, but that was my time to process all that happened, because I think that when we're in like whatever's occurring, right, where it's 24/7 and we're going, we don't have a lot of time to sit and contemplate or process what has occurred. And that's where it's like, if we can even take, and this is super important, I think, for any person, is taking that time for rest and reset. That's why had said, like, today, I'm like, I need my nap before the podcast, because Sunday is my like church, yoga, nap, and like
Yep.
making sure that you take care of yourself, especially if you are a care provider for other people. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, self-care, and we've talked about it. Self-care
mhm,
is so important.
yeah.
And I just want to point out the fact that you may provide insurance, but God provides
Mhm.
reassurance, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and it's one of those things that I don't know why people steer away from it. It becomes like an uncomfortable conversation for whatever
Hmm.
whatever it is. But the thing is like nobody's trying to push like beliefs off on somebody else, right?
No. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where if it's in your heart, right,
Hmm.
to have a belief,
Yep.
right, of a higher power, spiritual, structured, whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
it's so crucial and important to stay true to that. It brings structure into your life because we don't have all the answers,
Yeah,
you
that
know?
is correct. That's like the Catholic Church calls it, I think they call it the mysteries, right? And so I think that no matter what your faith is, you can sit there throughout your entire life and you'll always be searching for the answers, because not one human is going to have all the answers to whatever it is that we're seeking. And I think that's the amazing part of having a faith base, is that
Right,
you're forever building that relationship. You're always building and seeking that faith. It's like a never ending adventure, essentially.
right. Yeah, and the thing is I'm talking from personal experience, right?
Mhm.
And we're all guilty of it at some point in our lives of we call on him when things are wrong,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And to fix it and to give us patience and to
Yeah.
give, virtue and love and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. But he's always there, right? When
Yeah.
you are a faith-based person and, it is in your heart. The thing is like good or bad,
Mhm.
right? There's
Yeah.
no wavering. Right? And
Correct.
so often than not, people they get into, back themselves into a corner, and then that's
Mhm.
when they call for help,
Yeah.
right? Start the
Yeah,
process
there's
sooner.
that Jelly Roll song. When
Oh,
you said that, I was thinking about it.
yep,
I only talk to God when I need a favor, and I think that really sums up exactly what we do as Christians, or as like believers. Sometimes, not all of us do that. I can say, last night I had the unique opportunity to pray over the Austin Rodeo barbecue, one of the tents. So Austin has these pre rodeo barbecues, and there's like big giant tents, and there's different sponsors that have music going and barbecue. And so I was asked by nonprofit to come over and do a prayer, and so I did that Friday, and then I did that yesterday. And I was thinking about it as I was walking, because Friday it was pretty quiet rodeo wise. The rodeo hasn't really started yet, but it's like you've got all the tents, you've got all the barbecue. Yesterday when I went, it was really, really cold, but it didn't really matter. No one really cared that the wind was blowing and it was wild and windy. The place was packed. And so artists came and did music, and then I closed it out in a prayer. And I was up there on stage, and I was thinking about how well, one, how much a blessing it is that we even are able to do things like have a public prayer, but two, the fact that there's an entire space of hundreds of people of all backgrounds bowing, hats
mm,
off, and a pin
right,
could have dropped, And so when I got off the stage, the lady with the nonprofit, she's like, did you see that? And I'm like, no, I didn't see anything, right? Because I'm sitting there praying. I don't have any seeing. And she goes, well, I looked up while you were praying and everyone's head was bowed. And she's like, to the glory of God. And so I was just thinking about the fact that it's like this. I was humbled, one, that it's God lets me do this, that we get to go places and that we still get to have faith, whether it's in our country or in the military, that we still get to share it, and that we get to respect each other's religious backgrounds, because that's the biggest thing with the chaplain, is that we get the opportunity to support and provide. And so as I'm recruiting people, it's like that's the conversation that you have to have. It's like, this is a pluralistic environment. So I walk around with a cross on me, which people know what that means, and that kind of strikes up a conversation. But nowhere would I force my religion on anyone.
Right.
And so not everybody that we get that are going to be chaplains or want to be chaplains are going to be able to do that, right? Because it's like, if you encounter someone who's an atheist, you can love them where you're at, which is what my expectation, and that's what I do. But there's some people, when I talk to them, they can't do that, and so you're not going to be a fit for that military environment, because this isn't the Baptist church. So
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things that, I mean, even when I was a police officer, we had chaplains. In the military,
Mhm.
we had chaplains, and those people like yourself are it provides a level of comfort. It provides a level of openness to be
Mhm.
able to share, to be open, to open your heart to somebody else you may not even have met, right?
Yeah.
And there is a huge responsibility that comes with that,
Yeah.
and it's not easy, and
I do know.
yeah, I don't know personally, but
Yeah.
I can understand that it is not easy,
No.
especially with, of different religions, right,
Mhm.
and different beliefs and everything
Mhm.
else. There is a balancing, of even personalities that come with it as
Oh,
well,
yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
stigmas and perceptions and everything else,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
what is, helped you navigate? I probably know the answer to this already, but,
Well, yeah,
um
obviously God gives you most of what you need. But also I think that the blessing or the opportunity of just being the hands and feet in the uniform, which is meaning that I'm meeting you where you're at, and I have no expectation of where that is that you are at. And so just getting to know people for who they are, and knowing that a lot of people are going to already have a predisposition of what they think you're about, or the church hurt aspect, or whatever kind of hurt they're coming into it. And so I think, one, just knowing people where they're at, but also for me, it's like listening to the Holy Spirit, because the first couple times that I've interacted with people with suicidal ideations, that's like when I'm like, I would really like someone else to be here. This is me internally, right? The first time I'm like, when you
Right,
ask the question of, are you thinking about taking your own life? And they say, yes, I am. And you're like, in my head, I'm thinking, well, could somebody else help me now? But it's just you and that person. And so that's where inviting the Holy Spirit in and having him be alongside you on that journey, and just listening to his wording and what you need to do, then there's really no fear, because everything is for him.
right. Yeah, and those are very difficult conversations. I've had them many times with brothers and sisters in arms,
Hmm.
during, after,
Yep.
um, and as a police officer for 11 and a half years, it was running into veterans or anybody in general that had suicidal ideations. It's a
Hmm.
difficult conversation. It is an uncomfortable conversation nobody wants to have, right?
Yeah.
Because you have a loss of words at sometimes because you're not in that mindset in that moment, and you
Hmm.
have to try to find understanding of what's, coming out and being put in your lap, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think the more that we practice doing it, the easier it is. And so, whether it's taking a suicide intervention course, which they have a lot opportunities now, even for veterans and different organizations, where you can just take a class where basically the whole job of the class is to practice asking the questions. Like
Right.
Assist does it, and then ACE SI is the one that I recently did. And I think no matter how you do it, even if it was that you just sat around with friends and practiced asking the question, because a lot of times we beat around the bush and then we'll say, "Oh, are you feeling like hurting yourself?" No, absolutely not. I'm not thinking about hurting myself. I'm actually thinking about making myself feel better because what I'm in right now is so much pain. And so I think that we have to be really careful on how do we ask the question and to be direct and not afraid, because we
Right.
cannot be, if you see it, and a lot of times this is something that God will put on your heart, or and you'll feel it in your soul when you're encountering someone, whether it's just you can see the pain on them, or you can see the warning signs. If we don't ask the question, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves, but also to that person, because we don't know what is going to happen next if we don't ask the question. And so just that practice of asking the question and being unafraid, and also making sure, like I tell my soldiers, like making sure that you have a toolbox. Toolbox is making sure that you have like the suicide hotline on at all times on your phone, and military one source, some counseling opportunities, 911, like a backup, if they're still serving their chain of command, making sure that you got the chaplain of the organization, just some, or another buddy that can come over. There's a lot of nonprofits that are working with veterans, but we don't always handle suicidal ideations correctly. It's like
Right.
I've ran into it where I'm like calling 4 or 5 different people that should answer the phone and no one wants to answer. So it's like, okay, I'll go by myself, you know? And so I think just whatever organization that you're working with, if you're a veteran, making sure that you guys have like a telephone set up where these are people that would go with you, would respond to it, because it's not necessary that we go by ourselves if possible. You know, it's like something that if you have someone that's suicidal, it's probably best that you don't show up there by yourself. Probably should bring a friend or have a plan of how are you going to deal with this. A lot of, as you mentioned, like the police department, a lot of them now have a mental health team, which is awesome, because they do, when they have one of those teams, it really helps, because you don't have the opportunity for death by cop and all the other things that can come along with that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and, you talked about, calling people for support to bring with you,
mhm,
and the feeling of being alone in that, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's like tenfold,
yep,
when the person is calling out, to ask for help for somebody to come over, right?
mhm,
And a lot of
yep,
the times, the burden doesn't wanna be like, "I don't wanna bother the person, I don't wanna," you
yep,
know, um, just interject myself into their life to interrupt it and stuff because
yep,
they don't wanna necessarily 100% in that moment on a telephone call be like, "Hey, I need help, come over," right?
yeah,
And I speak from training and personal experience
mhm,
when I had my suicidal ideations, right?
yeah,
And, a lot of times and through this podcast, I've allowed myself to open up and be comfortable being uncomfortable and
mhm,
slowly starting to tell my story as well and
yeah,
bringing other veterans on to be able to do the same, military members, whatever, even people that have never served, because
mhm,
there's perspective and connection in which we can build with each other as human beings, first
yes,
and foremost, and the
absolutely,
love for each other to help support each other,
mhm,
right? It doesn't
yep,
matter, you know, when you get out and either a police officer, military, CEOs, whatever the case may be, support is support, love is love, right?
yeah,
And at the end of the day, like, just being a good human being is what speaks volumes when
yes.
supporting each other,
Yeah, just and the fact that they matter. I think that's the biggest thing, because it's like we
right?
don't have to have the answer or the solution to what they're going through. It's just sitting or standing alongside them and making sure that they know that they matter.
Right,
Um, and it's when we don't do that and we lose somebody, then you're sitting in a room full of people that, you know, knew that they mattered, but they're not there anymore to see it. And that's heartbreaking, because I've had both sides at this point where it's like I've lost soldiers And I also get to encounter people that I've saved, and so you get to see these people, and you get to, like, I'll see a couple people pop up on my Facebook, or I'll run into them somewhere. And when I do that, I'm thinking like, well, this is just amazing that they're still here today. And so I think that's the gift of having those conversations, or I call it a God pat, right? Where it's like, he'll have them send a text saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know that you're the reason that I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important and what you do and just being a good human,
Hmm.
being a
Yeah.
good person, first and if you start your day every day with that, and I started this thing a few months back. I'm like, "You know what? I wanna start my day whether somebody sees it or not,
Hmm.
I'm gonna just put a good morning and something inspirational behind it and
Yeah.
post it and try to do it on a daily basis. I don't know when I'm gonna catch somebody. I don't know, how they're gonna read it, if they see it and it's the best thing that they're able to see during that day and it helps them push through it, but it also helps me,
Yeah.
starting
Oh
my day
yeah.
off positive, you know?
Hmm.
And just it's those greetings, so often than not, we put on this camouflage, especially
Hmm.
getting out of the military, that everything's okay,
Yep.
and how many people have you talked to, you're like, "How's it going?" And you're like, "I'm good."
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just this just generic response,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And you can tell in the body mannerisms that something's a little off, but you don't wanna dig too much,
Hmm.
and you're like and then you finally, like you do go into that observation phase, right? Of,
Yep.
"Let me track them a little bit,
Hmm.
something's a little off. I don't wanna, kinda pry a little too much and push them over the edge."
Hmm.
And then you're like, "Hey, listen, you're not yourself today."
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk, you
Hmm.
know, and being blunt, right? And
Hmm.
being honest and
Yeah.
genuine in that moment,
Hmm.
with that human connection, that human moment of being, listen, I notice,
Hmm.
I care, you
Yeah.
know? It's it's one of those things that it's so powerful that it can't be ignored,
Yep.
because all we want is to feel that we're cared for. You know, whether
Hmm.
it's our brother or sister to our left or our right, right? That's all we want. We wanna feel cared about, right? And at the
Yep.
end of the day,
Absolutely.
when you get out, I struggled with it.
Yeah.
I
It's a
struggle with
huge transition.
Yeah, I struggle with it, even though, like, I went from, 6 and a half, 7 months after active duty straight into policing,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, in between and I still did the guard thing, after active
Hmm.
duty, and I quickly realized that, it's difficult to transition, especially with like kind of the group that you deployed with. You
Hmm.
got your inside jokes, you got kind of how you do things,
Hmm.
and everything else. And I would come across as awkward. I would come across as, like, trying to, like, make a connection, and that connection was awkward because it was funny with the guys that I served with, but it
Hmm.
wasn't funny in the civilian world, you
Yeah.
know? And then it's
Yeah.
like, nobody you get that feeling and that thought, "Nobody understands me," right?
Hmm.
"Nobody's gonna get me," and then you start down this path that leads
Yeah.
to potential destruction, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely like the transition from military to civilian is definitely, I can see it's the most challenging. I had my very short break in service, and I felt like I wasn't finished. And I think that's the other part that sometimes veterans are challenged with, is that their career ended sooner than they expected it to. Like, we all have in our heads how we want it to end, right? Like, this is
Right,
this is the rank I want to do. This is the things I want to accomplish. And so, especially when we look at our veterans that get out on a disability, or something happened within their career where their career feels like it got cut short for them. And
right,
that's, I think, the hardest transition. And then finding what is your identity after the military. Because as you were mentioning, it's like we do not always fit in the best with the community. Like when I was at Geico and I was going through this mentoring program for to get they call it pathways mentoring. They were said You're what they said that my overall existence was too military for them. And then I was too, I think they said I was too disciplined and too hard. And I had a drill sergeant mindset. That was the beginning of the 9 months of mentoring. So that was meeting one, right? And funny enough, nothing really changed. I just showed them a different side of me. So the first time that I went in front of CEOs and VPs, I was wearing a black and white suit, hair tied back, probably not as much makeup on, not anything cheerful looking. When I left the program, I came in, hair down, floral shirt, uh, big earrings, like I gave them the whole businesswoman floral outfit. And they're like, oh, wow, you've changed so much. No, I just showed you a different side. And so I think that we have to shape for that civilian mindset, which is that fair? No, because it's not fair that you have to show them a different version of yourself for them to accept you. But you also, as a human, we know these things about ourselves, right? And so we can be aware of the perception that we provide and start to shape that so that we fit better in society. But you still have to be true to your genuine self. All so it's like both sides were me. It's just they got to see two of me, and
Yeah.
they liked the second version better.
It's so true. You nailed it right on the head, right? And it's one of those things is they can't there's a certain societal thing of this is how somebody is supposed to be in business.
Hmm.
This is how somebody is supposed to look, talk, the whole 9
Yeah.
yards. In this job, this person should look like this. And it's an
Yes.
unfair objective,
Hmm.
especially for veterans that are coming out with more structure,
Hmm.
more leadership skills than any other company is gonna be able to
Yep.
give to, right? A lot of these civilians, they come out, they do their career in whatever job it is, they move up through the ranks in a civilian career. They do not send people, right, to leadership schools like they do in
Hmm.
the military. There's
Hmm.
not structure like there is in the military. So when the thing is people have to realize they see you as a threat. They see you as
Yeah.
competition because you already have it coming in and they don't have to train that into you,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So then they wanna try to mold you and put you in this
Hmm.
box,
Hmm.
right? And that box, we say, "We don't fit in that box because this is who we are,"
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And it's not saying that, like, our box is wrong, it's just we're staying true to who we are. We stay
Yeah.
true to our values, we stay true to our genuine conversations, our bluntness, right?
Hmm.
Not beating around the bush.
Yeah.
Everybody that I've run into, they just so don't wanna have the conversation, so they skate around it, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's why I was saying, like, it's super important to practice it even if it's not
right,
comfortable for you, um, because then it's not really so it's not so uncomfortable if you practice it, it's like a rep at the gym.
right. Yeah, and I think the big thing too, and I know there's a lot of, like, senior leaders that have been getting out of the military that are now their employment is, like, going around to companies and, like, helping them, like, train of,
Mhm.
you know, moving the company in a better direction, turning the
Yeah,
company around, but also the training of, like, veterans coming into the workforce,
yeah,
right? The knowledge that you can gain by training, right?
mhm,
And the expectations, right? And I talk about this a lot, and it falls on deaf ears with some because they don't understand it as much as I do, and I'm still growing and learning with it. Is
yeah.
the management of your own expectations getting out, right?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
You have to manage your own expectations getting out of understanding, like, yes, people aren't going to understand the military if they never served in it. Like,
Yeah,
that's just a fact. We can't
mhm,
we can't change that. We can educate as much as we want,
yep,
but unless, like, you've done it, just like
mhm,
anything else, nobody's gonna truly understand it, right?
yeah,
The education aspect, I think, though, is understanding that veterans add so much value to the workforce,
mhm,
right? No matter what job it is. Let me rephrase that. We're not all built the same, right?
no. Nope.
However however, right, the vast majority of veterans getting out, if they stay true to the teachings in the military, I
Mhm.
truly believe that they can make a such positive impact in the workforce if given the opportunity. And
Yeah.
we fall short on ourselves of representing ourselves to our fullest
Mhm.
abilities getting out. That
Yep.
onus is on us.
Yeah.
Right? There is no, like, token card that says, "You're a veteran, you're gonna get this." Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's sometimes where people fail is because they expect it to be easy. They're like, "Oh, I did this, this, and
Right.
this. I'm this rank." And it's like, well, your rank in the military really doesn't matter when you're transitioning into something else. It's how are you going to display your talent and how are you going to translate that over to the workforce? And I
Right.
think when you look at like guard and reserve, when we've been doing it part time, then you're like constantly doing the balancing act where you're like civilian achievement, military achievement if they're doing it part time. Now, if you've got AGR people, they experience the same thing as the active duty, where it's like that's all that they know. And so that's where we really, when you're thinking, okay, I'm going to retire in a year, it's like, even 3 years out, I'm a big planner. So it's like, what are we going to do? If I'm 3 years out, I need to be contemplating what do I want to do? What's plan A? What's plan B? How do I get there?
Mhm.
And it's the same with like my military career. I have plans of where I want to go next and how do I want to get there, and already planning 5 years in advance of how does it look. And but then it's like if that doesn't work, like if for some reason I was to depart the military tomorrow, what would that look like for me? Where am I going to go from there? And so we always have to be planning in advance, like as the military calls them, COAs, courses of actions. Like you should always have your three COAs in your head of, okay, I'm serving today, but what if something happened to me and I wasn't able to serve anymore? What would I do then?
Right.
Instead of like waiting for it's like the bomb drops and you're like, ah, what am I going to do now?
Right, right. Yeah, it's so true, and, I talked about this many, many times of, short of, like, something happening abruptly, like, my
Mhm.
my service abruptly ended, economic reasons, downsizing under Obama, they, shaved 365 days off my contract, and,
Mm,
you know, I was set to get out. I had orders one day to go to Fort Campbell, 101st, and the next day I was getting out.
mm,
So
yeah.
I understand the abruptness to it.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, I had also like formulated like contacts with the PD and like, the what ifs, and
Mhm.
kind of planning, okay, I'm gonna get back stateside because I hadn't been back stateside other than like kind of R&R here and there for like three and
Yeah.
a half years. And I just got back from, deployment to Afghanistan, in 2011, and I'm like, "Well, what am I gonna do?" I'm planning on settling down, having a family, everything else, you know, working that out, right? And I
Yeah.
even went through it recently, in the job that I have right now. I left the police department, and transitioned into a different job. I have to have that conversation. What is it gonna look like financially? What is it gonna,
Mhm.
this? What
Yeah.
if, and there's certain aspects to making that transition out of the police department there. I had some fail safes, right? Of security type within the job. The same
Mhm.
thing, in the military is like, as long as you don't screw up and you do a good job,
Yeah.
like you have a job for the most
Mhm.
part, right?
Yeah.
Just keep re-enlisting,
Yeah.
like there's kind of like that fail safe, and that's why like when I got out of active duty, I went National Guard because I'm like, what if like I don't land a job? I'm
Yeah.
just gonna activate myself, go active guard, right? And having that kind of plan, right?
Mhm.
The same thing happens in the civilian world, right? The only difference is when you're under contract with the government or the state, right? In the military, is it's a little bit different with guard and reserve. Not so much though, because you still have a contract, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
You can't just like put your 2-week notice in and be like, "Hey, this ain't working out."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mhm.
So there is that of like how do we transition it, better, especially, active, to civilian world where
Mhm.
there's an abrupt, date, time stamp, hard
Yeah.
stop, right? You're no
Mhm.
longer in, you no longer receive the resources,
Yep.
from active duty, right?
Mhm.
There's so much planning, time, effort, money of making you a soldier, sailor, marine,
Mhm.
whatever branch, right? 6 months, a year, 2 years sometimes, depending on what you go into. There is not as much planning going out,
No,
right?
they have the SFL tap, but it's like I think that the biggest thing is they are working on the resources, but as a military member, we have to choose to use them, because it's like
Yep.
you can either sorry. You can
Yeah.
either check the box or you can actually use the resources because they are working on a lot of resources. It's just because sometimes we're just so done that we don't really tap into the resources that they
Yeah.
even provide. Because even when you come back from a deployment on the guard side, they're having you do the SFL tap because you're coming off of active duty. But because you're on a time crunch and you're returning and you're tired, most people are like, I just want to press the button and get on with it. So they're not necessarily looking at the employment opportunities or getting into all the resources that they provide. And I think that's on us. Like we have to take ownership of that aspect as
Right.
the military members is to utilize the programs that they have. Um, Otherwise, we can't really be mad that it didn't work because we didn't necessarily try it out. And it's the same with like the networking aspect. It's like getting on to LinkedIn and building your network and starting to figure out like, okay, what do I want to be? Now that I'm leaving the military, what should I be doing next? And so if you are into a certain field, like you wanted to be in engineering next, it's like go on to LinkedIn and start tapping on different people who are in the engineering field, get to know them. Because most jobs that we acquire are not going to be ones where we apply for them. It's because somebody knew who we were and they're like, you're going to be a perfect fit for this. And that's the networking aspect. So I think that if there was anything that I could say for the military member is just that we need to be proactive and own it. Just like we own, promotions and all of the other things that we do in the military is as we're departing, we need to be owning that aspect is like making the plan and owning the experience, making sure we build the network, making sure we know what we want to do next. Is it going to be difficult? Yeah, it's still difficult. It just,
Yep.
we have to kind of make that future plan, figure out what future you wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. The onus is on us. Just like if you were a civilian transferring a civilian job, right?
Yeah,
You have to set yourself up for success. Is there going to be hard work, right? Yes.
yeah.
Is there going to be maybe harder work than you expected? Yes,
Hmm.
right? But
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, if a lot of people I've talked to, and I've felt this before, right?
Hmm.
We all feel it at some point of, I'm putting myself in a position for success and something fails, right?
Yeah.
Why? Why did it fail? Like I did
Yeah.
everything right. What the hell? You know?
Hmm.
Like what is going on? Like,
Hmm.
nobody then you start going down that negative path of like
Yeah.
nobody's understanding what I'm trying to do. Nobody's trying to like
Hmm.
really like read into my resume. Nobody's trying it's a reset.
Yeah.
There's something that is not working, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's time to hit that reset button. Maybe your
Hmm.
resume isn't just up to par to somebody else. Constructive criticism from other people,
Yep.
sending your resume to somebody else to take a look at, right?
Hmm.
I have
Yeah.
had so many drafts of, like, my resume to different people and handing them out
Hmm.
to, like, the civilian world and keeping it up to date, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you just never know when that transition period's gonna happen, right?
Hmm.
So having
Yeah.
something on standby, right? We're so do they still call it an I love me book in the military?
I think so. I mean, I haven't heard of a new term, so
Yeah,
it's
like the awards, the
yeah.
accolades, all
Yep.
that kind of stuff, like,
Hmm.
the trajectory from day 1 to, like, where you're at now.
Yep. Yeah.
So I teach this power class, the professional workforce readiness, and I tell and even the people I talk to, veterans, I'm like, "Listen, you're senior leaders, your commanders, all that kind of stuff, when you get an award, read what they wrote about why you got the award,
Yeah.
right? That is plain language of your leadership skills or your accomplishments or something like that of why you got that award. It shows your qualifications, like,
Hmm.
especially if you're going into a leadership role,
Yeah.
right? Of why you are a good fit for the job, right? And that's how we get that plain language. That's how, we start translating military lingo into
Hmm.
civilian lingo because what's written to get the award
Yeah.
is just that, you know?
Yeah. That's good.
So,
Sure.
well, let me dive into this real quick.
Okay.
So, you went enlisted to officer, obviously,
Hmm.
and you went into your chaplain endeavors and really followed your heart and everything. What is one of the biggest challenges that you face as a chaplain as being the support for military members?
Mm, I think making sure that you have balance because we can fall victim or I can fall victim like to saying yes too much, right?
Mm,
So I'm in the midst of a season where I can't say yes to all things. As I'm involved in my church, in two different groups, and then quite a few nonprofits. I do like city, I do prayers over different ceremonies, and then I've still got my drill weekends and my full-time recruiting job. And so making sure that we provide our own self with self-care, right? And so meaning giving yourself some type of grace to say, one, no, like, I'm sorry that this isn't going to fit. Like, I had been asked to do a ceremony yesterday, but I was already praying for barbecue yesterday. So it's like I could have done both, but then that gives me zero time left that belongs to me. And so making sure that we provide ourselves time, but also remembering why we're doing it. And so I think the challenge of it is really, yeah, just continuing to have that balance and provide self care and continuing to go back for me to the cross, right? So I spend each morning, and I've gotten into this mode where it's like I use the YouVersion Bible because I can sit at breakfast, right? So make my breakfast, sit down, pray, read the verse of the day, listen to the video, spend 5 to 10 minutes in prayer before I depart for the day. And then being very aware and making sure that each moment that I spend is on purpose. Because I think that sometimes we dilute our lives with things like I had taken a 40-day social media cleanse because sometimes we are sitting there wasting too much time, whether it's me as a chaplain or just civilians, right? I see so many people watching videos for hours and hours on end. And so just making sure that the time that we have in our lives, because it is so crucial and it's so short, that we use it wisely and that what we do is worthy. Not saying that everything that someone invites me to do isn't worthy. It's just, unfortunately, there's only so much time in the day and we still have to give ourselves some time and some grace. And so just having that balance of, um, checking with God essentially is like, is this something I'm supposed to do or is this not something that I'm supposed to do? And then staying true to the calling because we're in the middle or I'm in the middle of a pluralistic environment. So it can be very easy for someone to invite me to do something that's going to dilute my calling. And I'm sure that every person has heard a story of a chaplain that did something that wasn't okay, right? And so it's the calling is heavy. It is something that we carry, and it's like they say the cross is heavy, and I would agree with that completely. Meaning that because it's not Amanda doing this thing, it's the chaplain doing it. I have to be aware that the expectation is higher for me than it is for the E5 that's sitting next to me, and so it's like it's not Amanda did this; it was the chaplain that did that. And so just being aware of who you are in the calling, making sure you're true to what God's calling you to do, and that our ethics and morals are remaining at a high standard. Because Satan is always after those that God calls us. And so we have to be aware of those things.
yeah, absolutely. And you'd brought up before, about the health, the whole health, spiritual and physical and mental side of things. And
Mhm.
kind of break that down, like how you deal with that and kind of on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and especially with the polarized political divide that's happening in this country. I bring it up because it is important.
Yeah.
You know, it is important as Americans. It is important as people. To understand that beliefs, whether it's religious or not,
Mhm.
right? We can agree to disagree,
Yeah.
right? And still be good human beings and treat each other well,
Mhm.
right? And you know, how do you deal with that? Personally, not just talking to others, but how do you deal with that personally to be able to navigate being a chaplain and staying, kind of even keel um through all of this?
So with the mental, physical, spiritual, I think a lot of times of us as a car, or I'm sure maybe you've seen those mental health wheels where it's like it's a circle and it has all of the things that make us us. And what happens when we are off kilter, whether it's, we're mentally not okay or physically not okay, spiritually we haven't been spending time the way we should, then we're not rolling the way that we should. Right. And so I think about it like you're a circle, and all of a sudden, like this one part is missing. And so then you can't roll. And so for me, like I'm very on purpose with my time. So it's like wake up, spend time in scripture, and then every single day it's like I'm in the gym, I'm resetting in that capacity. And so that's the physical aspect. And then just being present, so it's like all of the things that we do on purpose to take care of our own selves. And also being, when you're talking about the political divide, um I choose that if it's something that I can't control, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting stressed about it, because we get so stressed out, and I see people being keyboard warriors or attacking each other, and it's like we lose our friends, or
Right.
or we could lose friends over these political things. And it's like the question that I would ask people is like, uh do you know Kamala Harris? Do you know Donald Trump? Because if you don't know them, why are we hurting each other's feelings for it? And so
Right.
just recognizing that there's so many things that aren't within our control. I had a supervisor I used to work with, and he'd say, because was guilty of this as a young adjuster and young supervisor, as I want to change the world. And he's like, is that in your circle of control? And so sometimes his voice will pop up in my head when I want to change things. And also being realizing that we can change big things, but we can't change it all at one time. Because I'm in this mode of I would like to change things within the chaplain corps, but we can't change things, right? Like I can't change things that have been happening a certain way for 30 plus years overnight. It has to take little tiny things. And so recognizing what's in your circle of control, what is not in your circle of control, and then being okay with that. There's a book that I was reading, it's on Audible. So I was listening to it last week, and it's called Let Them. I don't know if you've heard that one, but
No, I
it's so let them, and thousands of people have gotten let them tattoos. And really what it is like, does it belong to you or does it belong to them? So it's reminding you that people are going to make the choices that they want to make. And so for me, I can see someone going down a wrong path, or maybe I'll have a counseling with the same person 10 times, and I'll know that they're still making the wrong choice, but they get to make that choice. And so the let them theory is you're going to let them, right? Because I can't change their choices. You can sit there and I can plant seeds, I can try to show them, I can give them tools, but only that person can make the choice. And so when we're letting them, it means that essentially you're going to let it go. And I say let it go and let it be God's, because there's so many things that they don't belong to us. Our jobs as humans is to plant the seeds, to show them kindness, to give them the tools for success. what the person is going to do with the tool is on them. We don't get to choose that. And I think that's where, when we release that power, because as humans, we want to be in control of all things. Like you were saying, like the plan didn't work out. Well, there's so many plans that don't work out because God had a better plan. And
Right.
so if we're sitting there going, oh, it didn't work out, and we get so hyper focused on that, then the plan that he has isn't going to work out either, because we're holding on so tight to this plan that wasn't for us. And so mental, physical, spiritual, it's like making sure that you have a good routine of how are you going to take care of yourself, kind of like you take care of your car, making sure, you're maintaining yourself mentally, spiritually, you have a good schedule, good outline, and then reminding yourself of what belongs to you and what does not belong to you, because so many things don't belong to us. And why are we going to carry that load of things that don't belong on our shoulders?
Mm. Speaks so much volumes. I actually talked about this in a past episode of vehicle maintenance.
Mm,
And,
yeah.
and you just like nailed it on the head. Like it, and it's one of those things like we in life, right? You said with the vehicles, and I had brought that up, as an example of when our gas tank is about to be emptied, right? We go to the
Yeah.
gas station, we fill it up, right? And I talk in metaphors and why we use those metaphors and everything else, right?
Hmm.
When you start breaking it down, it becomes down to self-care, right?
Yes.
Just like you
Yep.
would care for your car to make sure it continues down the road, right?
Hmm.
And the wheels keep turning.
Yep.
It's that same concept, right?
Hmm.
And one of those factors is variables, right? The
Yeah.
variables that we can't control, you know?
Hmm.
And so beautifully put. Thank you for saying that, Amanda. Like I connect with it. I say it a lot. Um, but it is so, so, so true. That whether, you're I hate using the word misguided, you know,
Hmm.
but it is true. Like if you are misguided by information that leads you down a path of destruction,
Hmm.
right? Then you're opening your mind to be able to make an opinion for yourself. You're allowing others to control what you should think,
Hmm.
and I think it's on the level of we need to start having a conversation with them, you know, if you
Yeah.
haven't already, you know,
Hmm.
and just staying true to what you believe in your heart is good, and start with that and everything else will start to fall in place. One thing that stuck with me, I don't bring it up a lot. My grandmother said to me, worry about number one first and everything else will fall into place, And
Hmm.
when I was at a very young age, I obviously at 9 years old, 10 years old, whatever it was, I'm like, okay, I'm number one, I guess. you know,
Yeah.
I didn't really truly understand the deep meaning of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And it comes into that mind, body, spiritual healing. Like there's a healing aspect to things. There's an acceptance to things.
Hmm.
It's very hard for us to accept stuff that we may have like we put into place that like it was our wrongdoing, right?
Hmm.
Or accept the fact that we didn't have all the answers, or accept the fact that you know it didn't work out the way it should have. Accept the fact, acceptance is a huge thing,
Yeah.
right? And that's the first step in a healing process as well,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I learned over the years through my struggles and will not forget my struggles because it made me who I am today. Right? And
Yep.
there's so many people, including myself, that at first we wanted to do this outward trajectory and blame everybody else, and I'm not at fault,
Yeah.
right? And at the end of the day, self-care comes to down to us to take its onus on ourselves to be able to keep the car moving forward.
Yep.
And it's simplistic, that KISS method we use in the military and everything else. And piss poor planning equals piss poor performance, right?
Yep.
And it's so true. And, I think that anybody coming out of the military, with a transition, I think that having faith is crucial to being able to keep yourself guided on the path that you wanna be on, however that path is, you
Yep.
know? And if you can expand on that of obviously, this wasn't the first thing that you thought of going into the military, right?
No, no,
It was not
definitely
the
not.
first thing. It was in a sense, it was a calling.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I kind of joke because I didn't see myself being a chaplain assistant or a religious affairs NCO either. And so I had joined the guard originally to be a officer because they had this program you could be 18-month do OCS, and so I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. Well, when I got to that unit, they were like, well, everybody's deployed, so you can't go to the OCS symposium for a year. So I'm like, okay, so I'm sitting there and I don't really have a purpose. I'm cleaning toilets and helping with KP and doing all the things. And I encounter the chaplain and he didn't have an assistant at the time. So I said, like, I didn't say anything. I just started helping him, right? Like, started helping set up services, whatever. So I'm doing this for probably like that year. And then when the symposium's finally getting ready to be on time, then they asked me like, would you want to be a chaplain assistant? And I'm like, "Oh, be a chaplain assistant?" Like, this is me in my head, right? I'm like, oh no, no, thank you. Cause I had to double up on school because at that time they had changed the requirements for the bachelor's degree and I had a lot of credits, but I didn't have them in the right place. And so I doubled up and I'm like, I don't know. And so I get to the OCS symposium and then I get through the pre-OCS, which is like 5 drills. And each time that I went there, God kept being like, "You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be a chaplain assistant." And I fall in a hole on a ruck march. And when I fell in the hole, this is at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm wearing glasses and have a small face, right? So everything gets smashed, and I get back up. And God talks to me sometimes in like text boxes, and so it's like pops up. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be a chaplain assistant. And so then I get promoted at Geico, and the phase one of OCS is exactly the same as a supervisor training. And so it's same dates, everything. And I'm like,
Wow.
God's like, you're supposed to be a chaplain assistant. So I go back to the unit and I'm like, hi, I'd like to be a chaplain assistant. They're like, oh, well, we have, like, at this point, like, we have all that we need. We don't need you. They're like, go talk to the chaplain. And he says, okay, you can be double slotted. So I'm over there double slotted for like 2 years. And this was at the level where it's division. So you've got 5 chaplains and like 3 assistants. And so within the 2 years that I sat there, all the boys got out. And then it was just me and one other like master sergeant religious affairs NCO. And so at that point, then I'm like, okay, I'm hanging out with all these chaplains. And this is kind of the other part where I was like, I had never seen a female chaplain before. And all the chaplains that I'm working with are older, bald, white guys, right? So I'm like, that's what a chaplain looks like. Like, how are you calling me to do this? Did you see what these guys? Because I looked in the back seat one day, I'm driving them all, and I look back there, and it's like 5 white bald chaplains back there, that I'm driving, and they got chaplain jokes, and so the joke has been, it's like I hung out with them so long that I had to become one. But one of the things that they taught me, each one taught me that you could do church different, and church could be anywhere that um, God was, right? So it's like we did church in the smoking shelter, which was probably my first, my favorite of all services that we did, because we had a couple really musically inclined guys with like a drum and a guitar. And if you wanted to smoke a cigarette, that's cool, but we're going to be doing church out here. So you got to smoke your cigarette and you got church. Or we did it in the chow hall as they're prepping food. And so I got to learn that, one, you can meet people where they're at, was a big lesson. Two, church doesn't have to look a certain way. And you think about, how did Jesus do church? Jesus did not have a fancy building. He literally met people where they're at, through his, and sometimes it wasn't a tent, sometimes it was the side of a hill. And so I think with the military ministry, we're really getting back to the roots of how it was biblical. because there wasn't anything fancy. There's like the only time that I've had a building was during deployment, and it wasn't a fancy one, right? So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. In not just with church, but just meet them where they're at,
yep.
right? Of
Hmm.
just that connection, whether it's support, whether it's religious, whether, whatever it is,
Hmm.
is meet them where they're at. If it's in your heart to be there for that person
Yep.
in any way, shape, or form, you meet them where they're at,
Yes.
and especially when you know, I don't know what it is. So last Sunday, last week at church, Pastor Zach said the same thing. We got to meet them where we're at.
Yeah.
Like, it's so true. Whether it's a belief, whether it's religion, whether it's, a support, whatever it is, like that is the person's or people's comfort zone, right?
Hmm.
Or it's just, you know, the environment that you're in and shape shifting it into to just being part of life, you
Yeah.
know? And that is so true. And thank you for sharing that. Is there anything as a chaplain, the best advice that you've ever been given to persevere through hard times, other than following your heart, advice that you were given to persevere through some of the darkest times?
I don't know if it's advice or where it came from, but one thing that I encourage people is always that you're never going to stay in this season forever. Because
Mm.
I think that whenever we're in a really dark time, like I had, during deployment, I had a couple pretty big things happen at home at the same time that I was deployed. And so, in that, what was pressed on my heart was that none of this can last forever. Right. And so, when we are in a dark season, and we feel like it's never going to end, it's like this season will end and it will have sunshine tomorrow. And so we won't stay there forever. And when we are in that mode, a lot of times it feels like it's going to be forever. And when we look back and reflect a couple years later on whatever that we've went through, we can see like the movement, we can see the growth, we can see the shaping or the crushing, as they talk about in the Bible, that it's like we're like wine being crushed, grapes being crushed into wine. We cannot overcome and we cannot grow without being crushed. And so in those dark season that we're in, just knowing that that season's not going to last forever, you're going to come out on the other side. It's going to be brighter on the other side, and just to continue to persevere. And then sometimes if you don't feel like you can do it alone, invite someone in it, because throughout the Bible, it's like other people are raising up hands, they're helping people in the capacity of just walking alongside them. And so we don't have to do it alone. We can find a village to come alongside us. So the two things to really consider is that one, the darkness is not going to last forever, and two, to invite somebody else in it so you don't have to do it alone.
Beautifully said. That was very deep. And as you probably noticed, I closed my eyes because I was imagining the words of the grapes being crushed and
Hmm.
and a person being crushed and rising through it and everything else.
Yeah.
Very, very beautifully said, very deep, absolutely amazing. And, to sum it up, is this too shall pass.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
good times and bad times, this too shall pass. Amanda, I just want to thank you for coming on the
Thank
show
you.
and taking the time out of your day. And I would love to, invite you on again and be able to talk some more.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to gain insight, personally, professionally, inspirationally, spiritually, everything. I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that you continue on such a good and prosperous journey that you're on right now.
Thank
And
you.
uh, I, thank you is the only thing I can say, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's been a great time. I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, I look forward to hearing your podcasts in the future. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It's your host, Ryan Landry from the Everlasting Veteran Podcast, joined with Captain Amanda Williams, United States Army. Thank you, Chaplain. I appreciate your words of wisdom and your inspiration for everybody. And everybody, have a great day.
Thanks. Take care.